grant, and I'll be facilitating this morning's press conference. We have 4 people ready to make statements. We have Craig Ritter and Michelle Garland-Smith, who are both Michigan residents. We have Robert Naiman, who is an analytical chemist with Axe Laboratories in Alabama, and we have Dr. Richie Ott, who is an oil spill expert, all ready to speak to us today. And then after each speaker has given a brief statement, we will open it up to questions, and we'll go from there. So first up is Craig Ritter.
Hi, everybody. First, I want to thank you for joining this call. I'll try to keep this as short, as sweet as possible, and to the point. Again, my name is Craig Ritter. I'm a born and raised Michigander, and you pretty much sum me up as an outdoor enthusiast or a sportsman. My hobbies are pretty much everything you could possibly do in Michigan's outdoors, but I have to admit that fishing is probably at the top of my list, which ironically is what has brought us all to this call right now, trying to inquire and answer some questions that we have about these formations that have been found in the river that contain, Crayfish-like compounds. I first started to notice these formations late last year, but I didn't actually pick one up until early this spring, as one stood out to me that was embedded up under a tree stump in the riverbank. It was almost like hunting for morel mushrooms, if anybody's been hunting for morel mushrooms. When you find one in an area, your eyes are trained, so all of a sudden your eyes will pick up on the lake in the area. And from my experience in the river, I can tell you there are a lot of lake in the river here. They're in the river itself, they're in the backwaters, and they're buried in the banks and up under the banks. That day I picked that first one up, I grabbed a few formations and took them to a local person who said he had never seen any rocks, he had seen rocks like this in the river before. So I thought about the lifelong resin, I kind of almost dismissed it, as being natural formations. And that's until I went back into the river and found similar rocks, like iron ore and tufa-like rocks. I returned back to his house for a second look or a second opinion from him. When I showed him the rocks I had acquired now, he really couldn't give a definite answer. All he could say was that the rocks that he was familiar with that looked like this would cut your feet open when you stepped on them in the river. That made me immediately, on impulse, throw a formation on the cement ground and display to him how easily it just crushed apart with little pressure at all. He replied, "I don't think those are what I'm referring to." So, being an overgrown kid, basically, I conducted a few backyard experiments, took some of them home, and had results that, made me have even further questions. I was more confused. And not being educated in the field, I decided to ask for help in understanding this, and I started networking with people. After, I made a response, to the EPA, asking them to try to explain it and if they knew what it was, and the only response I got from the EPA was, "We have forwarded your information to the Marshall Field Office." So with that being said, through networking and talking with different people, we were able to collect and fund a private study that Bob had performed here at ACT Laboratories. And the results were pretty disturbing, finding out that Crayfish-like compounds existed in these formations. Now knowing this, it's pretty overwhelming for me, mostly because, again, I don't have the background. I'm not trained in this. I've never experienced anything like this before in my 40 years of being out in the woods and waters of Michigan. So, it's got a lot of curiosity, for me. It's built up a lot of questions, and without being able to further do my own experiment, my question and thoughts here, and again here, I'm reaching out and asking to others, in hopes to get answers here of, what this stuff is exactly, in the river, what it is, and what's going on, my 4 points or my questions, I guess, my biggest concerns are, I would like to know what exactly these things are. I would also like to know, what their chemical components are. I would also like to know, the outlook of these toxic things in the river. But most of all, the biggest concern of mine is, how did these Crayfish-like compounds that are similar to the compounds found near the Gulf of Mexico oil spill of 2010, how did they get into the Kalamazoo River? That's my biggest question. And in closing here, I'd just like to say that, we've recently been told that these things could be tufa rocks. And that's great. That's part of the mystery solved, but, that's a fact yet to be proven. And if that is proven, it's great again, like I said, but the fact of the real matter here is regardless of how these things are labeled or what we call them, they still contain Crayfish-like materials. And they're acting almost now, I can only assume, like another conductor, for this product to travel and migrate further on down the river to where, parts unknown, we have no idea. So it's, it's almost, the best analogy I can put on is it's almost like putting lipstick on a pig. We can call it what we want, but it's still going to be a pig, at the end. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now. That's my statement, my stance. And I'm asking for help. That's why we're here now. I would like to just further gain knowledge of this. It's a learning process for us all.
Thanks so much, Craig. So that was Craig Ritter, who's a resident in Michigan. Now we'll hear from Michelle Barlow-Smith.
Morning. My name's Michelle Barlow-Smith. I live at Kalamazoo River in 2010 at the time of the 1.1 million and counting gallon tar sand oil spill. I'm a photographer turned accidental activist due to the spill. At the time of the spill, I took photos and uploaded to CNN. I ended up going before Congress to testify September 15th of 2010. I was told I would be made whole. I asked several questions at that time. Now, 3.5 years later, I'm still asking questions. 3 years ago, we requested health studies and were turned down by Enbridge Energy, Calhoun County Health Department, Michigan Department of Health, and the federal government. I've continued to monitor people's health along the river. I am seeing a worsening of symptoms, such as people with COPD at level 1 are now at level 4 and 5 on multiple inhalers and medications. The skin issues, the breathing issues, the headaches, memory loss, dizziness, and multitude of complaints are worse than these. The deaths of 25 residents that I personally have known since the start of this leads me to question official assurances that there is no long-term health problem. With these toxic rocks being found in the river, the questions continue, and that's why we're holding this. 1, how did the chemicals get there, and what is being done to monitor the residents' and workers' health? 2, what does this do for the long-term recovery of the river and the safety of the residents along the river? 3, why are the citizens having to sponsor their own research? 4, if the officials are saying that no chemicals were used, yet we are finding them, who is doing the testing and what are they exactly looking for? The EPA itself has said that they are writing the book on cleaning up this toxic spill. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Michelle. So that was Michelle Barlow-Smith, who is a resident of Michigan and formerly lived along the river where the oil was spilled. So now we'll hear from Robert Naiman. And if you are just joining us, we're hearing statements right now from Craig Ritter, Michelle Barlow-Smith, Robert Naiman, and Ricky Alt. And then we will have space for questions from media people. So up next is Robert Naiman.
Hello, everyone. I am Robert Naiman, Senior Chemist at ACT Laboratory in Mobile. As Senior Chemist, I analyzed and compared petroleum-contaminated rocks, which were earlier incorrectly labeled tar balls. Tests were conducted on these hardened masses, and the water column from the Kalamazoo River as well. Samples were taken by Mr. Craig Ritter and sent to my laboratory. The results of the analysis showed an organic fraction extracted from the rock formations that was nearly identical in comparison to a control sample that was a piece of paper dipped into the actual Kalamazoo River oil spill of 2010 near Marshall, Michigan. In addition, tentatively identified compounds that were extracted from the test samples showed chemical degradation products that were in the masses and in the water column from the river. that were consistent with surfactant use. The presence of cyclic double-bonded OL compounds and ONE compounds, such as those found being 2-cyclohexene 1-O and 2-cyclohexene 1-one. These compounds were found in the tar balls, as you want to call them tar balls, in the masses and in the water column, and this shows man-made constituents present. The problem with cyclic bonds like this is that humans can't tolerate them because they are usually aromatic with ring structures. The findings that I put together were corroborated by Mr. Dave Taylor, who's a senior chemist at GeoLabs, and he concurred that the source of material in the tar balls or masses and in the water column were consistent with the degradation products of surfactants. This entire case is a situation where a company may have used surfactants that were really designed for equipment spray. These type surfactants evolved from an Exxon product in the late 1970s. The proper use of these type products were to do so sparingly and highly diluted and sprayed on equipment and then hosed off. It was not designed to be sprayed directly on an oil sheen on top of a body of water, nor was it designed to be delivered through the air. The actions taken to add surfactants to spilled oil in the Kalamazoo River, as in the case of the BP Facundo oil spill, is for poor decisions environmentally speaking. In this case, like the BP spill, the surfactant treatment resulted in an increase in specific gravity of the mixture, and therefore causing and or allowing this material to sink to the bottom and out of sight. In my experience, I've never reviewed research on the physical and toxicological effects of mixing surfactants with crude oil, bitumen, or any petroleum product. This research just, in my experience, does not exist. That's my statement.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. So again, that was Robert Naiman from ACT Laboratories in Alabama. Next up, we will hear from Dr. Ricky Ott, who is a toxicologist and oil spill expert.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Michigan residents convened this telepresser over concerns that the EPA is on the verge of prematurely closing the Enbridge tar sands oil spill cleanup after about 3.5 years of work. We say premature because the rocks that have been examined and analyzed by this team may pose health issues that are not being addressed by the EPA in this spill response. I made my first trip to Battle Creek, Michigan in August 2011 after spending a year in the Gulf Coast communities where I was dealing with public health concerns over the BP disaster. The thing that struck me in Michigan was how similar the illness symptoms were between the Gulf Coast residents and workers exposed to oil and dispersants and the Michigan residents exposed to oil and diluents. I've returned to both areas several times and plan to continue doing so, mostly to help people better understand chemical illnesses, environmental medicine, and what they might do to help themselves. Excuse me. This past August, Craig and others took me to part of the Kalamazoo River that had been oiled, and I saw these contaminated rock formations. I immediately thought of the BP disaster response when strange, unexpected oil dispersant plumes formed below the water surface after oil and dispersants mixed and combined with particles, algae, bacteria normally found in seawater. The chemical analysis raised further concerns. The traces of tentatively identified compounds suggest chemical degradation products that are consistent with surfactants. Yet Enbridge, the state, EPA, they all claim that no dispersants or surfactants were used during spill response. The rocks may tell a different story. It is disturbing to think that the levels of surfactants were high enough in the river at one time to be embedded in the river rock. Another concerned Michigan resident, Dr. James Timmons, has also done work to understand how the rocks act as a sink for tar sands oil. He is finding that the rocks are not a passive collector of tar sands contaminants, as some have assumed, but rather that the high surface areas of these tufa rocks are coated with a natural catalyst that actively binds tar sands and other petroleum-derived chemicals, like those found by Dr. Bob. I encourage media to read Timmons' comments posted in yesterday's Taib. The rock formations can be easily crushed and release the oil and chemicals into the water. The chemicals found in the analysis are known to pose a health risk to humans, yet EPA seems to know nothing about these strange rocks. How can EPA call the cleanup done without addressing concerns raised by these rocks? All of this raises a very serious issue. The federal framework for oil spill response is demonstrably inadequate for dealing with tar sand oil spills and offshore maritime mega disasters. The EPA and the Coast Guard, the two lead federal agencies in oil spill response, really don't seem to know much about the behavior of solvents like dispersants and diluents when combined with oil in the environment, not a lab, or the health implications of these oil solvent mixtures to people and the environment. The EPA continues to ignore the public's petitions and lawsuits demanding changes to oil spill response procedures based on lessons learned from these ongoing national disasters, like what is happening right now in Michigan. It's time EPA listened and learned and updates its very inadequate oil spill response plan. Thank you.
You probably received this press release from the Great Lakes Spill-Bit Defenders, which is an organization that Craig, along with several others, started this summer. And the Great Lakes Spill-Bit Defenders will soon have a website posted online. I would suggest following our Facebook page, the Great Lakes Spill-Bit Defenders, as well as our Twitter account, which is @Spill-Bit Defenders, where we will be posting information about the website. Again, we hope the website will be posted within the next couple of days. And on the website, we will be compiling all the information that is available in the documents linked in the press release, as well as other pertinent information that you've heard about over this call. So again, encourage you to follow the Great Lakes Spill-Bit Defenders on Facebook and Twitter. So if you have further questions about this story, please do email us at the Great Lakes Defenders@hotmail.com. And you can also reach us via social media. We are happy to answer any questions and hope that this story will continue to receive coverage over the coming weeks. So thank you very much for joining us.